Welcome to this episode of Door Church Connect, our weekly podcast about how to think and how to live biblically, which results in the blessing of God, His wellness, His favor, and prosperity in our lives. And I'm not going to make the mistake of past sessions where I leave our guest waiting for 5, 10, 15 minutes while I ramble on. So we're going to get right to it. We're not going to let him hang out in the green room. But we are very, very glad to have Pastor Wesley Pinnick with us.
Wonderful.
Who, along with his wife, Hannah, are pastoring and doing a work for God in Long Beach, California. And one of the reasons I really like Wes and talking to him, why I used every bit of leverage I could to get him here in this setting is I just enjoy how transparent he is when we talk about some very weighty topics. And so, Wes, thank you for being with us, and we finally made it work.
Yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, we're going to have a good time in research for my endless book project on trauma and 3-2-1, 3 seconds that will change your life. Wes has been a sounding board for me on that. And then when I preached in the Prescott Conference in July, a message, "How are you doing?" which comes from the biblical phrase, "Is it well?" And many of us know the later hymn, it is well with my soul." It was curious to me. He gave me some very helpful input, but it was curious in talking to him later how this resonated with him, and I guess some actual practices that you, exercises that you tried to put into place.
I guess so.
Yeah, you said you were trying to do something once every 2 or 3 days.
Yeah. No, every day. I when you started the wellness, first off, grateful to be here. So glad to be a part of this. I'm so excited. But yeah, so when you started the wellness, or you started talking about it, and the thought was, it is well with my soul. What I did when I knew you wanted me to come to the podcast, and then I really knew when you started calling me a bit more than I'm used to receiving a Pastor Warner phone call, I said, oh man, this is getting real here. So I started doing a little research, my own, not research, but I just did my own thing where what I did leading up to the podcast is I took the phrase, "It is well with my soul," and I put a timer on my phone for 3 times a day for a notification to come up to say, "It is well with my soul." So 3 times throughout the day, the times that I set on my alarm clock, I had it pop up and interrupt what I was doing and tell me, it said, "It is well with my soul." And, I know you've exhausted that phrase and everything kind of, into a lot of depths, into a lot of different ways. But I think for me, it comes down to a practical thing is I have to remind myself, and that phrase branches off in so many ways. Is sometimes it's an encouragement, and sometimes it's a reminder. Sometimes I need to say, wait a minute, it is well with, stop, it's well with my soul. I'm all right. And then other times it's like, man, it's it's well right now. It's good, thank God everything's going good. So to me, it was encouraging for a couple weeks to do that. I did it all the way up to here, to this time. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not going to continue to do it, but I just thought it would be
I like the idea. I might steal it and actually put some of the words to the song in there. We'll see. But,
I copyrighted it knowing that I could make a penny off of it.
That's it. Beautiful. No. Well, it was Wesley's military and combat background that really was the basis for the importance of talking about having a culture of trust, where you can be safe to be honest, to talk about those things that help things to be well with our soul. And I know that either this was my research or you mentioned to me, the number 22 has become a real rallying call for advocates trying to call attention to the problems and especially the suicide rate among veterans, especially those who served in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And so, that's a very sobering reality. And so we don't talk about these things in a casual, in a lighthearted way. We really want to try to be of help to those who are listening, some who may simply need understanding, others who may really need some help. And so, Wesley, just to encourage you at the outset, I believe that our conversation is going to touch on some deep things, some difficult things, but in the end, it's going to help people. And what we've been looking at recently as our outline is the Bible statement about the tremendous development of the sinless Son of Man, Son of God, where the Bible says he grew in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and man. And so if we break that down, it means he grew mentally, he grew physically, he grew spiritually, and he grew socially or relationally. And each of these areas is very important to our well-being and to us being able to glorify God. And so because we're talking about the relationship aspect, which is number 4, you are the cleanup hitter, if we use a baseball analogy, which I'm sure Gabe is more familiar with than I am.
No, the baseball analogies, my Giants are out, so I'm trying not to think about baseball that much. But Wes, everybody knows you as, Brother Wes or Pastor Wes. We grew up together. How old are you now, dude?
37.
37 years old.
And counting.
Sierra Middle School's finest.
Yeah.
So let's go back into a little bit of your background, because either people know you as Wes or Pastor Wes, but eventually you joined the Army, get out of high school, you joined the Army, you served our nation in Iraq during the most intense time of that conflict. When you got out, what was your rank? What was your MOS?
So let me go through that. I'll just give a little background. So I grew up in church, a church kid for all intents and purposes. Got saved at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, baptized at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I grew up in church the whole time, graduated high school, and then I joined the military, in all honesty, for a couple reasons. Number one, I wanted to get away from Tucson, just because the only thing I'd known was church. And, for a church kid, some people might hear that and that sounds offensive, but not because the environment was bad, but because I was young and there was so many other things that I saw beyond church that I was curious about, as most probably teenagers were or are. And so I joined the military. I enlisted in as a forward observer, and so the best way to describe that is we are the ones that have a radio on our back that would communicate with the artillery units where to send artillery, or even in some instances what's called CAS, which is close air support, which is where they would send 500-pound JDAMs, I think there were, into different locations. So my responsibility was primarily communication with that. So I joined, and I was attached to an infantry unit. So I was not an infantryman. I don't have that honor or prestige, but the only unit that I was in the entire time I was in the military and active duty for 3.5 years was an infantry unit. And so I trained with them. I did a lot of different things with them. I did go through a qualification course to go to Ranger School. I was not an Army Ranger, but I went through a course that was in a mock version of that, a 20-day version of a 60-day course. And so all of my training and the guys that I lived with in that time was that kind of scenario. But I was a good soldier in the Army. I joined at the enlisted rank E1, which is your entry rank. You can come in at higher ranks if you do different things, but I didn't do all that. But I went from E1 to E2 within 6 months, E2 to E3 at 9 months, and then E4 is kind of one of, you want to try to get that rank. You can get it at, I believe, 18 months is the minimum that you can get it, but people will have that rank for a while. So I got that at the minimum of 18 months, and then at that time, we deployed, and I was in the Middle East, and I got promoted to the rank of sergeant, which is in E5. And I got in at the minimum time, which I think it's 2 years. I think I was in the military 2 years and 1 month, and I was promoted to sergeant. So I fast tracked, and that was because I did a lot of courses. I got a lot of qualifications and certifications, and doing different, different exercises and stuff like that. So I fast tracked. I got in as a sergeant. I got out as a sergeant. At 3.5 years, I was, a sergeant.
What year did you go in?
So I joined the military in 2002, and I think I enlisted in September of 2002. Anyways, I did a 3-year. I signed up for 3 years, and while we were in the Middle East, I was actually supposed to get out of the military, but I was involuntarily extended. A lot of people got that. I was involuntarily extended because of obvious reasons that we were in the Middle East. So I got extended about, I think it was about 6 months I got extended, but so it was 3.5 years active duty. After that, I did do some reserves, but that's not really, anything significant to, kind of the context of the conversation. But I was a dental, I don't know what I was. I did something with dental. I never did anything actually with dental. But
so active duty versus reserve, that's a whole other conversation. That's a hilarious conversation as well.
Well, it's just, it's good. God bless the reserves. They're there for a reason. I'm just saying from, going from one extreme environment to this other was that. But in my time in the military, I was very involved in that. I was very now, I've been fellowshipping a little bit, so the tacos are starting to set a little heavier.
You should listen to our previous podcast.
And I'm starting to learn a little bit more about my body intake. My wife reminds me on a very consistent basis about what I'm putting into my body. And I'm not the spring chicken I used to be, but in the military, let me go off here, but just for people's understanding, I was very fit. I was very in shape. I could run a 2 mile I could run 2 miles in 11 minutes and 6 seconds was my record, which I know that's not an Olympic record or anything, but when you're talking about a 5.5 minute mile, that's
pretty good.
That's not nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? When the minimum for the military, I believe, was 13 minutes at the time, I could clock in at 11:06.
Wow. So
I was fit and I was very active. I enjoyed the military in my time. I know we're going to go into it, but you know, I don't have any brothers. I have 2 sisters. And so for me, the idea of being surrounded by other men from completely different backgrounds was a joy, because I felt like I was beginning to have a relationship with a brother. And I think if we're honest, I think there's always an intrigue about the relationship in the military between soldiers, and that was always interesting to me. Young boys find that very fascinating. People find that fascinating. People read books, write books about just the camaraderie that's there. So part of the reason I joined the military was I wanted to do something exceptional with my life. And so
what about your life before the military? We're both millennials. You're a PK. We're both PKs. So unpack that. What did your life look like before you went to boot camp, went to Sandbox, you and God, you and other people? How'd that work out?
I mean, I think what I enjoy about growing up in church is looking back, like retrospectively, what I enjoy about the church, and especially the Tucson church, is there really is just a lot of memories there. You know, a lot of kids grow up and the highlight of their childhood is going to a school dance or some sort of school event, where the church had so many different things going on, plays and so many activities and impact teams. And I went on a bunch of those. And, it formed a lot of who I am and how I think today, and how I respond to the gospel today, and what I think is necessary for a Christian to grow. I think, those were very influential in my life. But I will say, I was a church kid, so I was rebellious. I was very curious about the world. I thought I was missing out, like most church kids at some point, I think, face that kind of battle. I wanted to know what it was like to drink. I wanted to know what it was like to smoke weed. I wanted to know what it was like to go to a party, to kiss a girl, all those things, which, I had a curiosity about. I did dabble a little bit, not, I can't get up and talk about how I used to be Tucson's greatest drug dealer at one time or anything like that, but
it's a lot of those.
There's a lot of them around, but I did kind of I dabbled. I stuck my toe in the water, if you will, but I did I did want to get away, and I can remember clearly that when I joined the military, I wasn't really serving God, but going off track here. But I do want to say there was a time when I was 16, and I can remember times in Vision Unlimited when I was younger that I would feel God just speak to me in a very clear way. And I remember going on impact teams. One specifically, we went to Seattle, Washington, when Pastor Garrett was pioneering out there. Right. And so our flight got delayed 27 hours. And I believe Stacy Dillard was doing a revival that week. And it might have been one of the first times he was doing a revival, because I was probably 16. So this is 20 years ago. Maybe it wasn't Stacy Dillard, I don't know. But basically, I got a word that night, and that word was just, something that's always stuck with me, that I've held on to, that's kind of encouraged me through my walk with God. But, after that, I did fall off and kind of not take the things of God seriously, just because of just being young, I guess. I don't you know what I mean? I didn't want to serve God. And then I joined the military. I remember I was on a plane flying to Washington State, to my duty station there in Tacoma, Washington. And I was sitting on a plane, and I was reading a GQ magazine, and I said, I want to reinvent myself. I want to become somebody different. I don't want to be known as a church kid. I don't want to be known as a Christian. I just want to be viewed as a normal sinner. And I failed pretty miserably at that. But
there's no such thing. Let's go back to the group concept, because you served with a group of men. Some came home, some didn't. We're not trying to trivialize any of that. You fought side by side with these men. How does that still play a part in your life, that group?
Yeah. So when it comes to the men that I serve with, let me kind of go at it from this way. When I went to boot camp, I thought these guys were going to be my brothers for the rest of my life. I thought that there was such a strong connection, and that the experience that I felt, I thought, wow, this was so amazing. We went through so much together. Today, I don't even know if I could name one person that I went to boot camp with. Maybe one or two people, because that experience was suppressed by the experience that I met with the unit. So when I got to the unit, a lot of us were new there. So a lot of the guys that were in the unit at that time were new. And so we all kind of grew up in that unit together. So we knew each other. We lived in basically what would be dorm style housing. So we all drank together, we all partied together, we all worked together. And so it was very much, very close quarters in that environment. So everything we did was together. It was, everything. Like, there was very few times that you would do something by yourself without somebody from the military. In fact, I don't even know if I ever, did anything with somebody in the civilian world without somebody from the military. It's one of my friends. And so it was great because we were all in it together. We were all young. We all had our stories. We all had our backgrounds of what we were coming out of. And so there was just a sense of excitement in that. Let me give you an idea of kind of what it was. So in the infantry, we were part of what's called the Striker Brigade. So this is, I believe there's 3 levels, if you will, of infantry. You have your ground troops, which are basically the ones that just walk everywhere. Light infantry is a lot of times what it's called. And then you have your mech infantry, which is like a lot of times associated with the tanks, different things like that. So we were kind of the hybrid of light mech, where we had these Striker vehicles, which is an 8-wheeled vehicle, monstrous vehicle, and you would dismount from a shorter distance and then become and use the ground tactics there. So a lot of our exercises and a lot of our training was, I basically put it out as it was a very intricate game of laser tag. We would go in these large fields, and we would go out for 3 or 4 days at a time. So we were living out in the woods in Washington State, and we had regular weapons where we just basically put a laser on the end of our weapon, and we would had run scenarios. And so we would deploy within the United States to different states. Like California has a training grounds out in the middle of a desert. We trained there for 3 straight weeks in the field. Louisiana has a site that we trained at for another 3 straight weeks, just out, no showers, none of that, you know what I mean? But basically running war scenarios. The most intricate one we did was we went to Kentucky for 3 months, and they have a mock city with pyrotechnics. It's it's probably 20 blocks of buildings, 3-story buildings, 4-story buildings, that you basically run scenarios of assaulting and defending a city. So everything we did was very, even the training was very stressful. You know what I mean? It was exhausting because you were doing a lot of those scenarios over and over and over again. And so that all translated over into your, as intense as you were in your day job, when you came home, you wanted to release, you hadn't been home for 4 days, 5 days, and you got a shower, and then the same intensity you had when you were doing a combat scenario, you had that same, intensity when you were going out to drink on a Friday night. So the rowdiness that people kind of associate with the military, it's definitely going to be towards an infantry style unit where, it's combat, where there's a lot of, I don't want to say aggression, but just a lot of adrenaline going on there.
Right.
So.
you can't destroy energy, it only can dissipate. So Pastor Warner's sermon, you've heard it, How Are You Doing? When he talks about how you need to have the horizontal relationships with people who can speak into your life and say, how are things? Are you good? That was huge in the military, especially in the Army branch. They take it very seriously. How did that work? What was the ins and outs of How Were You Doing?
Yeah. So with that, in that environment, there's a lot of pressure. And so you do everything wrong all the time. There's a lot of scrutiny, and they very much, I mean, if cameras were to be in those environments, a lot of people would have a lot of complaints about how people speak to one another and different. I'm not saying it's all right, but I'm just saying that's the culture there, is that people are very direct and they do not beat around the bush in any form. They will speak to you, and you have to find a way to not take it as personal. So especially when it comes to rank, we would identify that as leadership. But when it comes to rank, if you're going through life, when somebody's having a hard time, the natural response is not, are you okay? The natural response is, I don't know what you need to do to figure that out, but figure it out right now, because you're letting these other guys down. Right. So that's the first response. And so there would come times in training a little bit. It kind of applies more to the Middle East. I don't know if you want to jump into that scenario.
Let's jump there. I mean, as far as where I had the privilege to serve vets for 10 years, right? So like coming into the VA, they told us we're not doing Vietnam again. Yeah. So let's figure out what we need to do to help these guys coming back from sandbox. Is that something you ran into, or is that just a lot of rhetoric?
One time we were out on a mission, and a lot of what we did a lot of very diverse missions in the Middle East. And so let me set the scenario up here. So every day, what we would do in the Middle East is we would, when we're in the Middle East, what we do is we would mount up, get in our vehicles. Let me paint the picture here. So we're in the Middle East, we have these vehicles, and we go out and we do patrols. Sure. And so what you're basically doing is you're trying to basically pick a fight, or see if anybody wants to pick a fight. You're not provoking, but you're out there looking for the ununiformed enemy, if you will. Right. So you're trying to find a scenario, or trying to find and eradicate the enemy at that point. So every day, 3 times a day, we would go out and do missions for 3 to 4 hours. And so when we first got there, I'll never forget, we would do this. So I had my body armor on, and I also wore a backpack because I had a radio. I had 2 radios actually going on. And so plus I've got 7 magazines, got a couple flashbang grenades, a couple regular grenades, and everybody kind of had their own thing. I had my weapon, which was an M4 for those military or gun enthusiasts out there. I had what I call the gangster grip on it, which basically you could hold it, and on it I had a tack light with a red laser, and changed it to a green laser. I had an ACOG, so that way I could use for sights. It was all sighted in for under 50 meters and all of that. And so every day we would basically go out. When we first got there, we would go out, and you got to understand, 18-year-old, I was 20 years old when I was over there. Most of the guys that were there were the same age. The guys that were leading the squads are 25, 26-year-old team leaders, which at that time they would say squad leaders are winning the war. They were the ones that were, because you're split up in a city. So we're not talking about an open field or anything like that. We're talking about you're going door to door, the door-to-door ministry there, right. On an outreach. Right. right. to see what's going on, and right. So But let me paint the scenario a little bit more. While we were doing that, where we were living, you've got to understand, when we first moved in, we were living inside these connexes that were 2-man connexes, and so they weren't that big. If I were to give a diameter, if you will, it'd probably be about 8 feet by 12 feet. And so it was not very big. 2 people could fit in there, maybe a little bit bigger than that, but it wasn't very big. We had a wall locker, each had a wall locker, and we didn't have any regular clothes with us. We only had military clothes with us, which played a factor mentally, and all that. And so when we first got there, we were being mortared a lot. And so basically the enemy, I'm going to call them the enemy would set up makeshift mortar tubes, or had mortar tubes, and they would launch mortars into our base. And so there was, when we first came in, a couple days before, one of the rooms got hit a mortar, and it wounded the guy that was in the room. So when we first got there, I was sleeping under my bed because we heard the mortars coming in all the time. So every day there's mortar bunkers outside of our rooms and stuff like that. But I just said, you know what, I'm just going to sleep under my bed with my vest over my body and go from there, And then after a little while, short period of time, I said, forget it. I don't care what happens. I'm going to get a good night's sleep. I'm not going to do all that. So that's kind of the environment. So every day we're going out doing missions. On top of that, so to give you, people could think of it as a 9-to-5 job, but we would go at least 3 times a day. And then we had what was called QRF. So QRF is Quick Reaction Force. Basically, it's like being on call for the military. So we would have to stay in a room, and we'd have to be, if we got a call that somebody was in a situation that they couldn't handle, we had to be rolling outside of the gates within 15 minutes. And so it was kind of a week-long time where we were just ready and available to go. So we went, sorry, I'll shorten this up here, but we went remember when we first got there, we went 17 days, and then we got half a day off where we didn't have to do missions.
That's great.
And then it finally worked out over time where we would go 9 days on and 1 day off. So in that time, there was times I really didn't even know what month I was in, let alone the day, because all of that's just removed. So everything is about that relationship with that guy, with your guys in your squad, with the people next to you. And so what started early on, though, you got to remember, when we're rolling outside of these gates, the previous night before, we would roll down this one main strip. It's called Tampa. They named these roads Tampa. And so we'd roll down this main strip, and there's a traffic circle called the Yarmouk Traffic Circle. We would roll down this, and oftentimes when we would drive down there, guys would pop out of windows and just start shooting us with AKs from an elevated fighting position. And we had to, stop, road, do our tactical maneuvers, dismount, go into these buildings and, occupied with people in there, and do what we had to do in those scenarios. So this was an everyday scenario. And then on top of that, we had, we were manning our own jail, and we had to do one of the probably things that people would find interesting, I think, is we had to conduct raids. We would have tips come in about people that were terrorists or suspected terrorists, and we'd go and do these raids. And so, we were using, I don't know why we call them, or I called them that, we call them Wally bombs. And so it's a water impulse charge. We were taking our medical supplies, our IV bags,
right.
I think it's a 500 ml
right.
IV bag, and we were using det cord that you'd use to blow C4, and we were tying it up, a couple knots, and you put it on a metal door, and the way you put it's called a water impulse charge. When you ignite it, it basically blows the door open. And so,
wow.
To give you the idea, we would do these raids, and we would go and we would extract these people, which is a whole scenario in itself. And so that's where the trust comes in. So what they have is, I'll give you an example. When you're entering into a house, you just don't know what's behind that door. Mm-hmm. And so now you're doing this 3 times a day, maybe 4 times a day in the middle of the night, where you're going and you know that you're going to a place where they very well could shoot at you. In fact, we can get into it later, but we did have a few people that died from entering the room. And it wasn't necessarily the first person that went in because it was the shock. It was the number 2 guy that went in because that person had the time to grab their weapon and aim it at the doorway, which we call the funnel of death. So when you're going into this house, you've got 3 guys, 4 guys behind you. And so you've got to have so much trust. And we rehearsed this so many times. I mean, I could probably still do it today. I haven't done it in 15 years. I could still do it today with these guys where we learned each other's body movements. We knew each other so well that one would go this way, and we knew how to respond to what each one of us were thinking. So the level of trust between us was so unspoken. Mm-hmm. That even just our body movements were. So when we talk about how you doing, in the training scenario, and then you talk about the combat scenario, and we can unpack this as much as you guys want to. But while I was over there, let me tell you this: I was engaged to a girl that wasn't in church or anything like that. I got engaged before I left. And so a couple guys did, a couple guys got married, a couple guys married some questionable people. Very intricate time, but a lot of guys did some crazy things before we left. And let me speak on that real quick. That was a moment for me because that was the first time that I kind of realized I might not ever come back to America alive. I remember I called my parents. I'll never forget. I can tell you where I was. I'm not saying it because I'm a guy or anything. I'm not saying I don't cry, but I wouldn't call my parents and cry just for hey Dad, somebody yelled at me. It wasn't like that. I'm saying, but this time though, when I called my parents, I realized I just don't know what I'm going into right now. I don't know if this is the last time I'm going to speak to them. They're going to speak to me. So it's set in, and then looking back 16 years ago. These guys are kissing their wives goodbye. Mm-hmm. They're kissing their kids goodbye. Pregnant wives. Mm-hmm. And now I'm married now, and so I feel the weight a little. But I'm thinking about so now these you're looking at these guys' wives and them, and they're looking at you like take care of my husband.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Take care of my boyfriend.
Right.
There's so it's a very intense, but if you look at video, I have some videos of us. You look at us, we're just joking around, laughing at each other, giving each other a hard time. Like, oh man, look at you, you're crying like a little baby over there, man. What's wrong with you? You're going to get emotional on me. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the environment. Very, very, I guess, boyish, if you will, is
high testosterone.
Yeah, there we go. High testosterone. So, in different scenarios throughout the time, you know people's emotions because we'd lived together for 2 years. We'd worked every day together for in my case 2 years. So you every day, and so you could just read people when they were upset. You could talk to them, hey, what's up? You good? And they're like, yeah, I'm all right. I was just thinking about my girl or just thinking about my kids. It's like, yeah, man, And so there was just that moment where a lot of guys just, the emotion would hit them of what they were going through.
Hey guys, we've been having some amazing content with Pastor Wesley Pinnick from Long Beach. We're going to end it here, but we're going to pick up next week right where we left off, so you don't want to miss that. It's going to be some more outstanding stuff. So see you next week.